The courtroom was dead silent. Every eye was fixed on Judge Raymond Henshaw, a man known for his stern rulings, short temper, and most notoriously, his deep-seated prejudice. His piercing blue eyes glared down at the woman standing before him, Detective Aisha Carter, a proud and fearless black woman who had spent years in law enforcement, fighting for justice. But this was different. Today, she wasn't in uniform. Today, she wasn't holding a badge. Today, she was just another black woman in his courtroom. And Judge Henshaw wanted to make sure she knew it. "You people," he sneered, his voice dripping with contempt. "You never know your place. You think you can just walk in here and demand things. You're lucky we even let you speak in this courtroom." A hush fell over the room. Gasps echoed from the jury. Even the court stenographer's fingers froze on the keys. Detective Carter didn't flinch. She had heard racism before. She had fought against it her entire life. But this was something else. This wasn't whispered behind closed doors. This was public. This was humiliating. She took a deep breath, steadying herself, but before she could respond, Judge Henshaw leaned forward and smirked. "I should have you dragged out of here," he said, his voice low but sharp as a knife. "Black women like you don't belong in places like this. You belong in the streets, not standing in front of me, wasting this court's time." And that was it. The moment that changed everything. Because exactly 7 minutes later, that same judge, so proud, so powerful, was the one being dragged out in handcuffs. By her. 2 weeks earlier, Detective Aisha Carter stood in front of the mirror, adjusting her tie. Her reflection stared back at her. Sharp brown eyes, short curls neatly pinned back, a face that had seen too much but refused to break. It was supposed to be a simple day. Testify in court, present her evidence, and let justice take its course. But something about today felt different. Her phone buzzed on the dresser. She picked it up and saw a message from her partner, Detective Mark Ellis. "Ellis, be careful in there today. Judge Henshaw is on the case. You know how he is." She sighed. Everyone knew how he was. The stories about his bias weren't just rumors. They were facts. The number of minorities who had walked into his courtroom and walked out with harsher sentences, unfair rulings, and shattered lives was staggering. But Aisha wasn't just any woman. She was a fighter. She grabbed her badge, slipped it into her pocket, and left her apartment. The case she was testifying for was a big one. A powerful businessman, Thomas Grayson, had been accused of money laundering, fraud, and bribing officials. Aisha and her team had spent months gathering evidence, wire transfers, hidden accounts, secret recordings. The case was airtight. Or so she thought. She arrived at the courthouse, walking past journalists and camera crews. The air was thick with anticipation. Grayson had deep pockets, and people were already whispering that he had connections in high places. She entered the courtroom, her heels clicking against the polished floor, and that's when she saw him. Judge Henshaw. The look on his face when he saw her walk in said it all. He didn't like her. He didn't respect her. And he certainly wasn't going to make this easy for her. Aisha took her seat, gripping the files in her hands. She wasn't afraid. But she knew something was about to go terribly wrong. The trial began, and from the start, Judge Henshaw made his stance clear. He interrupted her testimony, dismissed key pieces of evidence, and even allowed Grayson's lawyer to object to things that were legally sound. It was blatant, disrespectful, wrong. Then, when Aisha tried to push back, it happened. "You people," he said, his voice slicing through the air like a whip. The courtroom froze. The words hung there, heavy, thick with meaning. Judge Henshaw smirked, as if daring her to react. Aisha clenched her fists. She could feel the anger bubbling inside her, but she wouldn't let him win. She wouldn't give him the satisfaction. Then he went further. "Black women like you don't belong in places like this." The jury shifted uncomfortably. The prosecutor's face paled. The audience murmured, but no one spoke up. No one except her. "Excuse me," Aisha said, her voice firm, her chin high. Judge Henshaw leaned back in his chair, his arrogance suffocating. "You heard me." Aisha's jaw tightened. She had spent years following the law, fighting for the truth. And now, standing here, she realized something. Judge Henshaw wasn't just biased. He was corrupt. She could see it now, the favoritism, the way he protected men like Grayson, the way he manipulated the law to serve his own twisted ideals. And suddenly, she knew what she had to do. 7 minutes later, as the court recessed, Aisha stepped out. But she didn't go home. She went straight to the evidence room. And what she found changed everything. A single file, hidden, forgotten, a document that linked Judge Henshaw to Grayson's corruption. Money trails, secret meetings, emails, proof. Her heart pounded. She turned on her heels and marched back into the courtroom. Judge Henshaw was still sitting at his bench, smug, untouchable. But not for long. Aisha strode forward, holding up her badge. "Judge Henshaw," she said, her voice strong. "You're under arrest." The courtroom erupted. Gasps, shouts, chaos. The judge's face twisted in shock. "What?" "You're under arrest for conspiracy, bribery, and obstruction of justice," she continued. "You thought you were untouchable, didn't you? You thought no one would find out. But guess what?" She stepped closer, looking him dead in the eye. "You messed with the wrong black woman." 2 officers rushed in. The courtroom watched in stunned silence as the same man who had insulted her, humiliated her, tried to break her, was now being dragged away in handcuffs. Aisha stood tall. She had won. But this was just the beginning. Because what she had just uncovered was bigger than anything she had ever imagined. The moment was electric. The courtroom was in chaos. Reporters scrambled for their phones. The jury whispered furiously. The stenographer stopped typing altogether. It was as if time had frozen, locking everyone in a moment of pure disbelief. Judge Raymond Henshaw, the man who had spent years sitting high above everyone else, passing judgment without mercy, was now standing. His face twisted with shock, his hands trembling slightly as the officers grabbed his arms. "This is ridiculous," he roared, his voice echoing off the marble walls. "You have no right. You." Detective Aisha Carter tightened her grip on the folder in her hands. "You can argue that in court, Judge. Oh, wait. You won't be the one running this courtroom anymore." The officers moved swiftly, pulling his arms behind his back. The cold metal of the handcuffs snapped into place. The great Judge Henshaw, a man who had ruined countless lives with his biased rulings, was now a prisoner in his own courtroom. He turned his head, his furious blue eyes locking onto Aisha. "You're making a mistake." "No, sir," she said, her voice unwavering. "The only mistake was thinking you could keep getting away with this." As the officers led him out of the courtroom, the room erupted into a frenzy. Lawyers whispered among themselves. Journalists nearly tripped over one another trying to rush out and break the story. But Aisha wasn't finished. She turned and walked straight to the prosecution table, slamming the folder onto the wooden surface. The lead prosecutor, a tall man with graying hair named Roger Daniels, picked it up with shaking hands. "What is this?" he asked. "The smoking gun," Aisha said. "Documents linking Judge Henshaw to Thomas Grayson. Wire transfers, hidden meetings, forged case files. He's been covering for Grayson for years." Daniels flipped through the pages, his expression darkening with every line he read. This is enough to bring down more than just Henshaw," he whispered. "This could take out half of Grayson's network." Aisha nodded. "Exactly. But we need to move fast. If Henshaw knows, then Grayson knows. And if Grayson knows—" Daniel's face paled. "Then he's going to run." An hour later, the entire courthouse was buzzing with activity. Federal agents had arrived, sweeping through Judge Henshaw's office, collecting documents, computers, anything that could tie him to the case. Outside, news cameras flashed as reporters shouted questions. Aisha stood by the courthouse steps, watching it all unfold. She had done what no one else had dared to do, brought down one of the most corrupt judges in the city. But she wasn't celebrating, because she knew this was just the beginning. Her phone buzzed. Ellis, turn on the news. Now. Aisha frowned and pulled up the live broadcast on her phone. A reporter stood in front of a massive estate, her voice urgent. We are reporting live from the residence of businessman Thomas Grayson, where sources tell us that he has disappeared. Just moments after Judge Henshaw's arrest, Grayson's security team was seen clearing out his mansion. Neighbors say black SUVs left the premises at high speed. Authorities believe he may be attempting to flee the country. Aisha's grip tightened around the phone. She turned to Daniels. We need a warrant for Grayson. Now. Daniels was already dialing. The next few hours were a blur. A citywide manhunt was launched. The FBI got involved. Airports were put on high alert. Every officer in the precinct was working overtime, scouring security footage, chasing leads. But Grayson was slippery. By the time they raided his mansion, it was empty. His offshore accounts, already drained. His private jet, gone. The man had vanished. Aisha sat in the precinct, staring at the map in front of her, her mind racing. He has to be somewhere, she muttered. Ellis sat across from her, rubbing his temples. Aisha, this guy has money. Connections. He's not gonna be easy to catch. She leaned back, exhaling sharply. We need to think. He couldn't have gone far. He had no time to plan. Ellis nodded. So what's his next move? Aisha tapped her fingers against the desk. If I were Grayson, and I knew the law was closing in on me, I'd go somewhere I still have control. Ellis frowned. Like where? Aisha's eyes narrowed. Like someone else on his payroll. Meanwhile, in a dimly lit warehouse on the outskirts of town, Thomas Grayson sat in the backseat of an armored SUV, his hand shaking as he lit a cigar. Across from him, a man in a sleek black suit adjusted his cufflinks. Judge Henshaw's arrest has put a target on all of us, the man said coldly. The FBI is watching everything. Grayson exhaled smoke, his fingers twitching. I just need time. Just a few days to disappear. The man smirked. Disappearing is expensive, Thomas. And right now, you are a liability. Grayson's heart pounded. No, listen. I can fix this. I just need. A single gunshot rang through the warehouse. Grayson slumped forward, his cigar slipping from his lips. The man in the suit pocketed his gun, sighing. No loose ends. Then he turned to his men. Find Detective Carter. She's next. Back at the precinct, Aisha's phone rang. An unknown number. She hesitated before answering. Detective Carter. A deep, unfamiliar voice spoke. You should have left this alone. Aisha sat up straight, her pulse quickening. Who is this? Click. The line went dead. Aisha's blood ran cold. She turned to Ellis. I think we just became the next targets. Aisha Carter stared at her phone, the words still ringing in her ears. You should have left this alone. The voice had been calm, deliberate, a warning, a threat. She locked eyes with Ellis, her longtime partner and closest friend. He had seen the look on her face before, pure, burning determination. Tell me you traced that call, Ellis said, already reaching for his laptop. Aisha shook her head. It was blocked. No ID, no location. Ellis swore under his breath. You think it was Grayson? Aisha hesitated. No, something feels off. She took a deep breath, trying to ignore the uneasy feeling creeping up her spine. We need to move fast. If someone is trying to clean up loose ends, that means. Ellis's phone buzzed. He checked the screen, and his face paled. Aisha. Grayson's dead. Her stomach dropped. What? Ellis turned the phone toward her. It was a message from a contact in the FBI. Thomas Grayson found dead. Gunshot wound to the head. Execution style. Aisha's mind raced. That wasn't law enforcement. No way, Ellis said, shaking his head. That was a hit. Aisha stood up so fast her chair scraped against the floor. Someone is tying up loose ends. First Henshaw gets arrested, now Grayson's dead. Ellis ran a hand over his face. Whoever made that call to you, they aren't warning you. They're hunting you. Aisha clenched her jaw. Then we need to find them first. The precinct was buzzing with the news of Grayson's murder. Agents, detectives, and officers scrambled to piece together what had happened. Aisha and Ellis were already 10 steps ahead, huddled over a whiteboard in their department's war room. We need to follow the money, Aisha said, marking out names connected to Grayson. Who benefited from his death? Ellis pointed to a name on the board. Carter, what if this wasn't just about Grayson? What if this goes higher? Aisha followed his finger. Senator William Rothwell. Her chest tightened. Rothwell was a powerful politician. He had ties to law enforcement, major corporations, and underground dealings. If Grayson had been exposed, Rothwell had every reason to wipe him out before he could talk. Ellis grabbed his laptop. Let me see if any unusual transactions link back to Rothwell. Aisha nodded and grabbed her phone. She needed a source, someone inside Rothwell's world who would be willing to talk. She scrolled through her contacts before stopping on one name. Danielle Mason, a high-end accountant turned whistleblower. She had worked with Rothwell's network before going into hiding. If anyone could confirm their suspicions, it was her. Aisha called the number. It rang. Once. Twice. Then. Click. A whispering voice answered. Who gave you this number? Aisha kept her tone steady. Danielle, it's Detective Carter. We need to talk. Silence. Then, a shaky breath. You shouldn't have called me. Aisha pressed. Grayson is dead. You're next if you don't tell me what you know. A pause. Then, in a low, panicked voice. I don't have time. Meet me at the old train station. Midnight. Come alone. Click. The line went dead. Aisha exhaled slowly. This was dangerous. But she had no choice. Ellis was watching her closely. What was that about? She grabbed her coat. We have a meeting tonight. Midnight. The old train station was abandoned, rusted tracks stretching into the darkness. Aisha pulled up, parking her car in the shadows. She checked her gun, then stepped out. Her footsteps echoed against the cracked pavement. She scanned the area, her senses sharp. A figure emerged from the darkness. Danielle Mason. Her blonde hair was tangled, her eyes darting around in fear. She looked thinner than Aisha remembered. You weren't followed? Danielle asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Aisha shook her head. Tell me what you know. Danielle swallowed hard. It's bigger than you think. Grayson was just a puppet. The real power is in the people who backed him. Rothwell is one of them, but he's not the only one. Aisha's heart pounded. Who else? Danielle opened her mouth. Bang. A gunshot split the night. Danielle's body jerked. Aisha's instincts kicked in. She grabbed Danielle as she collapsed, dragging her behind an old train car. Danielle gasped, blood soaking through her sweater. They found me. Aisha pulled out her gun, scanning the shadows. Someone was out there. Watching. Waiting. Her mind raced. This was a setup. She pressed a hand to Danielle's wound. Stay with me. Tell me who's behind this. Danielle coughed, her lips trembling. Then she whispered 2 words. The Brotherhood. Aisha's blood ran cold. The Brotherhood. A secret organization rumored to control everything from politics to law enforcement. They were ghosts. No faces. No public records. Just whispers in the dark. A rustle. Footsteps closing in. Aisha tightened her grip on her gun. She had walked into a trap. And now she had to fight her way out. Aisha pressed her back against the rusted train car, her heart hammering in her chest. The night air was thick with danger. She could hear the slow, deliberate crunch of footsteps moving toward her. She had seconds, maybe less, to act. Danielle Mason lay in her arms, her breath shallow. Blood seeped between Aisha's fingers as she tried to apply pressure to the gunshot wound. "Stay with me, Danielle," she whispered. Danielle's eyelids fluttered. She was slipping fast. Aisha's grip on her gun tightened. She peered around the edge of the train car, scanning the darkness. A shadow moved near an old platform. The shooter was circling, hunting. "They won't let me leave alive." Aisha had two choices, fight or run. She chose both. With a deep breath, she pivoted and fired. The gunshot cracked through the night. A figure ducked behind a pillar. Aisha moved fast, dragging Danielle behind an old crate. She needed cover. Another shot rang out. The bullet hit metal, sparking just inches from her head. Aisha cursed. The shooter was skilled, professional. She pressed her gun against Danielle's palm. "If they come for you, shoot." Danielle's fingers trembled around the weapon. "You have to," Aisha said firmly. "Stay awake. Stay alive." Then, without another word, Aisha took off. She sprinted through the shadows, her body low, her movements precise. She needed to draw the shooter away from Danielle. Another shot. This one grazed her shoulder. Aisha gritted her teeth, ignoring the pain. She dove behind a rusted train engine, counting her bullets. 4 shots left. The footsteps grew closer. The shooter wasn't rushing. They were taking their time. Aisha slowed her breathing. She needed to lure them in. She picked up a metal pipe and tossed it to the left. It clattered loudly. The shooter took the bait. As soon as they moved toward the sound, Aisha stepped out and fired. The bullet hit. A grunt of pain followed. A figure staggered back, clutching their side. Aisha aimed again, but before she could take the final shot, another sound cut through the night. Sirens. The shooter hesitated. Aisha didn't. She charged forward, tackling them to the ground. They hit the pavement hard. The gun skidded from their grip. Aisha pinned them, her gun pressed against their temple. "Who sent you?" Silence. The shooter's face was masked, but their breathing was heavy, labored. "Who sent you?" Aisha demanded again. Still nothing. Then, to her horror, the shooter smiled. Click. A small device in their hand lit up. Aisha barely had time to react before the warehouse behind them exploded. Flames erupted into the sky. The blast wave sent her flying, her ears ringing, her body slamming against the pavement. The shooter was gone. Aisha groaned, trying to push herself up. Everything was spinning. Then she remembered. Danielle. She scrambled to her feet, coughing through the smoke. Danielle. She ran back toward the crate where she had left her. It was empty. Aisha's stomach clenched. Danielle Mason was gone. Hours later, Aisha sat in the precinct, an ice pack pressed against her bleeding shoulder. Ellis stood across from her, arms crossed, his expression grim. "That was a hit squad, Aisha," he said. "You should be dead." She exhaled sharply. Danielle said one name before she disappeared. Ellis leaned in. "Tell me." Aisha met his gaze. The Brotherhood. Ellis stiffened. "No." "Yes." "No, no, no," he muttered, pacing. "Aisha, we don't go after them. No one does. They don't leave trails. They don't make mistakes." Aisha dropped the ice pack onto the table. Then why did Danielle know their name? Ellis shook his head. "She's dead. Or worse." Aisha's jaw clenched. "Not if I can help it." Ellis sighed. "You don't get it. If the Brotherhood is involved, we're out of our depth. We have no backup, no resources. They have people everywhere." Aisha narrowed her eyes. "I don't care." Ellis slammed his hands on the table. "Damn it, Aisha. These people don't just kill you. They erase you. They make it like you never existed. She stood, meeting his intensity with her own. Then let's give them a reason to remember me. A long silence stretched between them. Finally, Ellis let out a slow breath. You're not gonna stop, are you? Aisha shook her head. No. He ran a hand through his hair. Then I guess I'm in too. She allowed herself a small, grateful smile. Ellis exhaled. All right. First step. Before he could finish, the power in the precinct flickered. Then the lights went out completely. A hush fell over the station. Phones went dead. Computers shut down. Then, out of the silence, a single message flashed across every screen. A message meant just for Aisha. You should have left this alone. Aisha's blood ran cold. They weren't just watching. They were already here. The precinct was swallowed in darkness. Phones were dead. Computers frozen. The eerie glow of a single message flickered across every monitor, across every screen. You should have left this alone. Aisha's breath caught in her throat. The Brotherhood had made their move. Ellis cursed under his breath. This is bad. Aisha's pulse pounded. They're in the system. They just cut the entire precinct's power. Then, a metallic clunk echoed through the silence. The electronic doors leading in and out of the station locked. Aisha and Ellis exchanged a look. They just trapped us in here, Ellis murmured. Shouts erupted from the other rooms. Officers scrambled, banging on doors, fumbling with their radios. Aisha grabbed her gun. This isn't just a warning. Ellis nodded grimly. This is a hunt. Then the emergency lights kicked in. Dim red bulbs flickered to life, casting eerie shadows across the precinct. And in that red glow, the front doors opened. Two figures stepped inside, dressed in all black, silent, unarmed, but the way they moved was wrong. Calculated, precise, like they didn't need weapons to do damage. Ellis instinctively reached for his gun, but Aisha grabbed his wrist. Wait! She studied them. These weren't just hitmen. They were messengers. One of them, a tall, pale man with piercing gray eyes, stepped forward. Aisha Carter. His voice was smooth, eerily calm. We need to talk. Aisha held her ground. You think shutting down a police station is the way to do it? The man smiled. We needed your full attention. Ellis tensed beside her. Yeah. Well, you got it. The man tilted his head slightly, as if studying them. We know what you've been looking for. And we know you won't stop. That is unfortunate. Aisha's grip on her gun tightened. You killed Grayson. You took Danielle. The man's smile never wavered. We correct mistakes. Aisha clenched her jaw. And what mistake did Danielle make? The man didn't answer. Instead, he slowly reached into his coat pocket. Every officer in the room raised their weapons. Easy now, he said, pulling out a small black USB drive. He held it between his fingers. No tricks, just information. Aisha narrowed her eyes. What's on it? Answers, the man said simply. Aisha's stomach twisted. She had played this game before. Nothing came without a cost. But before she could speak, the man dropped the USB on the floor. And then, the power cut out completely. A deep, suffocating darkness swallowed the precinct. Aisha's heart pounded. She reached for Ellis, but the second her fingers touched his sleeve, gunfire erupted. She hit the ground, covering her head as bullets ripped through the air. Shouts, screams. Then, silence. The emergency lights flickered back on. The two men were gone. All that remained was the small USB drive, glinting on the floor like a poisoned apple. Aisha slowly picked it up. Ellis rubbed his temple. Please tell me we're not plugging that in. Aisha turned it over in her fingers. We don't have a choice. Half an hour later, they sat in Ellis's apartment. The precinct was compromised. The Brotherhood had proven that. They needed a safe space, Ellis set up his personal laptop, completely offline, no external connections. If this USB was a trap, it wouldn't take down any government systems. "All right," he said, cracking his knuckles. "Let's see what our new friends left us." Aisha inserted the USB. A single folder appeared. Truth. Ellis exhaled. Well, that's not ominous. Aisha clicked it open. Inside were dozens of files. Documents, recordings, bank statements. Then she saw it. A video file labeled QONFASSION. Her hands trembled slightly as she clicked it. The screen went black. Then a grainy image flickered to life. A room. A chair. And in that chair, Danielle Mason. Bloodied. Bruised. Eyes hollow with fear. Aisha's breath caught. "Oh my God." Danielle's lips trembled as she spoke. Her voice was weak. "If you're watching this," she whispered, "it means I didn't make it." Aisha's chest tightened. Danielle swallowed hard. "They made me talk. I didn't want to, but they have ways." Her voice broke. "I told them about you, Aisha. I told them what you knew." Aisha's blood turned to ice. Danielle choked back a sob. "It's not just Rothwell. It's bigger. It's judges, politicians, CEOs, law enforcement." She looked directly into the camera, as if she knew Aisha would be watching. "The Brotherhood isn't just a secret society." She took a shuddering breath. "They own the system." Aisha's stomach twisted. Danielle's voice turned desperate. "They won't let you stop them. They'll make you disappear. But if you're still fighting, if you still want the truth, you need to find." A loud bang. Danielle flinched. Her eyes filled with terror. Then, the screen cut to black. Aisha sat frozen. Ellis swallowed. She was about to give us a name. Aisha clenched her fists. "Then we find it." Ellis hesitated. "Aisha, these people took down a judge. They took down Grayson. They wiped out Danielle." Aisha's eyes burned with fury. "And now they're coming for me." Ellis looked at her. "So what do we do?" Aisha's voice was steady. "We go to war." The night air was thick with tension. Aisha and Ellis sat in his dimly lit apartment, the glow of the laptop screen illuminating their faces. Danielle's broken voice still echoed in Aisha's head. "They own the system." She exhaled, trying to steady her thoughts. They had come too far to turn back now. Ellis shut the laptop, rubbing his temples. "Aisha, we need to think this through." "There's no time to think," she snapped. "Danielle was trying to tell us something before they got to her. We need to find out what it was." Ellis leaned forward, his voice low. "Aisha, do you even hear yourself? We're talking about going up against a secret organization that kills people in broad daylight and erases them like they never existed." Aisha clenched her jaw. "And what? We just let them win." Ellis sighed. "No, but we need to be smart." Aisha took a deep breath. He was right. Running headfirst into this would only get them killed. They needed a plan. She pulled the laptop back toward her and reopened the files. "We need to find the missing piece," she murmured. Ellis frowned. "What missing piece?" Aisha clicked through the documents. Danielle was about to give us a name. Someone important enough that the Brotherhood didn't want us to know about them. That means there has to be a record somewhere. Ellis leaned over, scanning the files with her. "All right. If we assume Danielle found something, where would she hide it?" Aisha's mind raced. Danielle had been terrified, but she had also been smart. She wouldn't have just kept all her information in one place. Then it hit her. "The safe house," Aisha said suddenly. Ellis blinked. "What?" Aisha looked up. Danielle had a safe house. Before she disappeared, she mentioned it once. Said she kept a stash of backup files in case things went south. Ellis frowned. "And you're just now remembering this." "I didn't think it was relevant until now," she admitted. But if she was about to tell us a name, chances are she wrote it down somewhere. Ellis sighed. Where is this safe house? Aisha hesitated. Outside the city, an old cabin in the woods. Ellis groaned. Of course it's in the woods, because nothing ever goes wrong in the woods. Aisha ignored him. We leave in an hour. Ellis threw up his hands. Oh, so we're just going to walk right into a potential ambush. She met his eyes. They don't know about the cabin. Ellis let out a humorless chuckle. You really believe that? Aisha didn't answer. She couldn't afford to second-guess herself now. 2 hours later, they were on the road. Ellis drove, his knuckles tight around the steering wheel. Aisha sat in the passenger seat, scanning the dark road ahead. The city lights faded behind them, swallowed by the dense forest that stretched out on either side. The air grew colder, the silence heavier. Are we sure this is a good idea? Ellis muttered. Aisha kept her eyes forward. No. Ellis scoffed. Great, love the confidence. She ignored him, gripping her gun in her lap. Something about this felt off. Too quiet. Too easy. The Brotherhood didn't make mistakes. If Danielle had hidden something important, they would have been looking for it too. Which meant her stomach clenched. We're being watched, she said suddenly. Ellis stiffened. How do you know? Aisha's eyes flickered to the rearview mirror. That black SUV behind us. It's been trailing us for the last 5 miles. Ellis cursed under his breath. Are they waiting to make a move? Not yet, Aisha said. They're watching. Making sure we leave them to something valuable. Ellis tightened his grip on the wheel. So what's the plan? Aisha's mind raced. If they stopped at the cabin now, they'd be walking into a trap. She made a decision. We lose them first, she said. Ellis glanced at her. You got a trick up your sleeve. Aisha smirked. Always. She reached for the glove compartment and pulled out a small metal device. Ellis glanced at it. Is that what I think it is? Aisha nodded. EMP jammer, short range, enough to fry their GPS and cameras for a minute or two. Ellis exhaled. You are terrifying. She grinned. I try. Then she flipped the switch. The SUV's headlights flickered. The engine coughed. And then, the vehicle swerved wildly, its electronics fried. It veered off the road, crashing into the trees. Ellis whooped. Hell yeah. Aisha stayed focused. That bought us time, but they'll send more. Ellis nodded. Then let's get to that cabin before they do. 20 minutes later, they pulled up to the cabin. It was small, worn down, hidden deep in the woods. Aisha stepped out first, gun raised. The night was still. Too still. She moved cautiously up the steps, testing the door handle. Unlocked. She glanced at Ellis. That's not good. They moved inside. The air smelled of dust and old wood. The cabin was exactly how Danielle had described it. Messy, scattered with papers and old files. But something was wrong. Aisha's stomach twisted. Someone's already been here. Ellis frowned. How do you? Then they heard it. A soft creak. A breath. A whisper. Aisha spun just as a figure lunged from the shadows. A knife gleamed in the dim light. Aisha ducked, twisting away just in time. The blade sliced the air where her throat had been. She hit the ground and rolled, grabbing her gun. Ellis fired. The attacker dove behind a bookshelf. Who the hell is this? Ellis shouted. Aisha gritted her teeth. Brotherhood. She fired 3 shots, forcing the attacker to retreat. Then, a second figure appeared. Ellis cursed. We've got company. Aisha's mind raced. They were outnumbered. Outgunned. She needed an exit. Her eyes darted toward a trapdoor in the floor. She grabbed Ellis's arm. Basement. Now. They dove for it, just as bullets ripped through the cabin walls. The trapdoor slammed shut behind them. They landed in darkness. Ellis groaned. Tell me you planned this. Aisha pulled out her flashlight. Nope. Ellis exhaled sharply. You're gonna get us killed. Aisha ignored him, scanning the room. Then she saw it. A metal box. Danielle's backup files. Aisha grabbed it, her heart pounding. Above them, the floor creaked. The Brotherhood was coming, and they had nowhere left to run. The wooden floor above them creaked again. Slow, deliberate. The Brotherhood was here. Aisha gripped her gun, pulse pounding. She and Ellis crouched in the dark basement, surrounded by dust-covered crates and old files. The metal box holding Danielle's backup files sat between them. Ellis whispered, "Tell me there's a way out of here." Aisha's eyes flickered around the room. No windows, one trapdoor, no exits. "We're trapped," she admitted. Ellis let out a shaky breath. Not what I wanted to hear. A heavy thud came from above. They were being hunted. Aisha gritted her teeth. She had been in bad situations before. Shootouts, standoffs. But this was different. The Brotherhood wasn't just some gang. They were powerful, organized, and deadly. And they wanted her dead. Ellis checked his ammo. "We can't stay down here." Aisha's mind raced. If they tried to shoot their way out, they'd lose. They were outnumbered, outgunned. Then she saw it, a rusted air vent near the back wall. "It's small," Ellis muttered, following her gaze. "You sure will fit?" Aisha didn't hesitate. "We don't have a choice." Ellis sighed. "I hate this plan." She pried off the vent cover. Dust spilled into the air. The tunnel inside was just big enough to crawl through. A loud bang from above. The trapdoor was being forced open. "Go now," Aisha whispered. Ellis scrambled inside first, crawling through the tight metal shaft. Aisha followed, gripping the box of files tightly. Behind them, the trapdoor burst open. Boots hit the wooden floor. "We know you're down there," a deep voice called. "Come out, and we'll make it quick." Aisha clenched her jaw. Not a chance. She pushed forward, crawling through the vent. Sweat dripped down her back. Every breath echoed loudly in the confined space. Then, gunfire erupted behind them. Bullets ripped through the vent, barely missing Aisha's legs. "Faster," she hissed. Ellis grunted, moving as quickly as he could. The tunnel stretched on for what felt like forever. Then, finally, light. A small opening. An exit. Ellis kicked it open and tumbled out into the open night. Aisha followed, gasping for air. They had made it, but the Brotherhood wouldn't stop. Ellis pushed himself up. "We need to go. Now." Aisha looked around. The cabin sat in the middle of thick woods, miles from civilization. A single road led back to the city. And there, parked at the tree line, a black SUV. Her stomach clenched. "They knew we'd come here," she realized. Ellis cursed. Of course they did. Then, the driver's door opened. A tall man stepped out, dressed in black, calm, unshaken. And behind him, Danielle Mason, alive. Aisha's breath caught. Danielle's face was pale, her wrists bound in front of her. A bruise darkened her cheek. She looked terrified. "Aisha," she whispered. The man next to her tilted his head. "Detective Carter, we finally meet." Aisha raised her gun. "Let her go." The man smiled. "You've been causing quite the problem for us. That ends tonight." Aisha's finger tensed on the trigger. Ellis whispered, "Aisha, be careful." The man didn't move. "You want her back. You want to live. Hand over the files." Aisha's grip on the box tightened. Danielle shook her head frantically. "Don't do it." Aisha's mind raced. This was it. The moment. If she gave them the files, she lost. If she didn't, Danielle would die. The Brotherhood always cleaned up their messes. Aisha had seconds to decide. Then, she made her choice. She threw the metal box to Ellis. "Run," she ordered. Ellis didn't hesitate. He bolted toward the trees. The Brotherhood reacted instantly. The man raised his gun. But Aisha was faster. Bang! She fired first. Her bullet tore through his shoulder. He staggered back, cursing. Aisha lunged forward, grabbing Danielle and pulling her behind cover. Gunfire erupted. Bullets whizzed past them. Ellis had disappeared into the forest, the files with him. Aisha grabbed Danielle's face. "Are you okay?" Danielle's eyes were wide with fear. "We have to go." Aisha nodded. "Follow me." She fired again, forcing the Brotherhood to take cover. Then she and Danielle ran. Through the trees, over fallen logs, deeper into the darkness. The sound of their pursuers faded behind them. After what felt like miles, they finally stopped, breathless. Ellis was waiting. The files were safe. But this wasn't over. The Brotherhood would come for them. And next time, they wouldn't be running. They'd be fighting back. The forest was eerily silent. No gunfire, no voices, just the sound of Aisha, Ellis, and Danielle gasping for breath. They had been running for what felt like hours, pushing deeper into the woods, away from the Brotherhood's reach. Aisha scanned the trees. "I think we lost them." Ellis leaned against a tree, clutching the metal box. For now, Danielle was still shaking. Her wrists were raw from the restraints, her face pale. They were going to kill me," she whispered. "They only kept me alive in case you came for the files." Aisha exhaled sharply. "Well, we have the files now, and we're still alive." Ellis shook his head. "For how long?" Aisha didn't answer. They couldn't stay in the woods forever. They needed a plan. Danielle swallowed hard. "The files. They're everything." Aisha turned to her. "What do you mean?" Danielle hugged her arms, her voice trembling. "They don't just own the system. They built it. Every case Judge Henshaw covered up, every dirty cop he protected, every bribe that kept the Brotherhood in power. It's all in there." Ellis's eyes widened. "You're telling me we have proof of an entire criminal empire?" Danielle nodded. Aisha stared at the metal box in Ellis's hands. This wasn't just evidence. This was war. Ellis blew out a breath. "Okay, so what's the move? We can't go back to the precinct. We can't trust anyone. The Brotherhood has people everywhere." Aisha's mind raced. They couldn't hide forever. If they wanted to survive, they had to expose the Brotherhood. She made a decision. "We go public," she said. Ellis frowned. "Public? Like what? Posted on Twitter?" Danielle shook her head. "No, the Brotherhood would bury it before it got any traction. We need something bigger." Aisha's eyes darkened. "We need to force their hand." Ellis groaned. "Why do I feel like I'm not gonna like this plan?" Aisha ignored him. She pulled out her phone and dialed a number. It rang once, twice. Then, a voice answered. "This is Channel 7 News. Who am I speaking to?" Aisha's grip on the phone tightened. "This is Detective Aisha Carter," she said, her voice steady. "I have a story that will change everything." 1 hour later, downtown news studio. Aisha, Ellis, and Danielle sat in a dimly lit office, waiting. The news director, a woman in her mid-50s with sharp eyes and an even sharper tongue, paced in front of them. "You're telling me," she said, arms crossed, "that you have undeniable proof of a secret organization controlling the legal system?" Aisha nodded. "Yes." The director scoffed. "That's a hell of a claim." Ellis leaned forward. "It's not a claim. It's fact." He gestured to the metal box. "Every name, every transaction, every murder they covered up. It's all here." The director hesitated. Then she sat down. "Okay," she said. "Show me." Aisha opened the box, pulled out the first file. And the moment the director saw the name on it, her face went pale. "Senator Rothwell," she whispered. Danielle nodded. "He's not just involved. He's running it." The director's hands trembled as she picked up the document. "If this is real, Aisha cut in. It is. And you need to air it. Tonight. The director swallowed hard. If I do this, I'm putting a target on my back. Aisha met her gaze. You already have one. A long silence stretched between them. Then the director exhaled. We go live in 2 hours. Aisha nodded. Make sure the world sees it. 1 hour later, outside the studio, Aisha and Ellis stood near their car, watching the city streets. The sun had set, and tension hung in the air like a storm waiting to break. Danielle sat inside the car, still shaken. Ellis checked his watch. If this works, the Brotherhood will be out of hiding. Aisha nodded. That's the plan. Ellis sighed. You're insane, you know that. Aisha smirked. I've been told. Then, her phone rang. A blocked number. She answered. Silence. Then, a voice she didn't recognize. Low. Cold. You just made the biggest mistake of your life. Aisha's grip on the phone tightened. No, you did. Click. The call ended. Aisha turned to Ellis. They know. Ellis exhaled. Then we better be ready. Because in 1 hour, the war was going public. 1 hour later, live broadcast. The newsroom was buzzing. The cameras were rolling. The anchor, a polished man in a navy blue suit, looked straight into the lens. Good evening. Tonight, we bring you a story that may change the course of this nation's justice system forever. The screen shifted. Images flashed. Documents. Names. Transactions. Everything. The truth was out. Then, boom. A massive explosion ripped through the building. Aisha and Ellis, watching from their car, were thrown back by the shockwave. Glass shattered. Flames erupted. The entire newsroom was gone. Aisha's heart stopped. Ellis coughed through the smoke. Holy. Aisha stared at the burning wreckage. The Brotherhood had just silenced the truth. And now, they were coming for her. The explosion sent a shockwave through the city. Sirens screamed in the distance. Fire consumed what was once the news studio. The truth buried beneath flames and debris. Aisha's ears were ringing. She pushed herself up from the pavement, coughing as smoke filled the air. Ellis groaned beside her, rubbing his head. Tell me that didn't just happen. Aisha's hands clenched into fists. The Brotherhood had made their move. They didn't just want to stop the story. They wanted to send a message. And the message was clear. We will kill anyone who tries to expose us. Danielle stumbled out of the car, her face pale. The files, she choked out. The reporters, are they? Aisha scanned the wreckage. People were running, screaming. The fire roared, swallowing what was left of the newsroom. They were too late. Ellis grabbed her arm. Aisha, we need to move. Now. Aisha's mind raced. The Brotherhood had escalated. This wasn't just about stopping a broadcast anymore. This was war. She took a shaky breath, forcing herself to focus. We're not done, she said. Ellis scoffed. Aisha, they just blew up a building. What part of this is bigger than us, don't you understand? Aisha's eyes burned with fury. I understand that if we stop now, we lose. Danielle wiped soot from her face. But how do we fight them? We just lost our only way to expose them. Aisha's jaw tightened. No, they still had one move left. We go straight to the source, she said. Ellis narrowed his eyes. What? She turned to Danielle. You said Rothwell is at the center of this. He's running it. Danielle nodded. Yes, but... Aisha's voice was firm. Then we take him down ourselves. Ellis stared at her. You want to go after a senator. Aisha's gaze was cold. Not just a senator. The kingpin. Danielle swallowed. If we do this, there's no coming back. Aisha exhaled. We were never going back. A long silence stretched between them. Then Ellis sighed. I hate this plan. Aisha smirked. Good. That means it's the right one. 1 hour later, Rothwell's estate. The mansion loomed ahead, a fortress of wealth and corruption. Guards patrolled the perimeter, their movements precise, calculated. Aisha, Ellis, and Danielle crouched in the shadows, studying the layout. Ellis whispered, "How exactly do you plan to get inside?" Aisha pulled out a small device. Rothwell's security system is connected to the city's grid. That explosion, it just caused a citywide blackout. Ellis blinked. Wait, you planned for this? Aisha smirked. I planned for a backup plan. Ellis groaned. You're a menace. Aisha ignored him. She clicked the device. The mansion's lights flickered. Then, darkness. Danielle sucked in a breath. That's our window. Aisha nodded. Move. They sprinted across the lawn, slipping past the disoriented guards. Inside, the mansion was eerily quiet. Aisha led the way, gun drawn. She knew where Rothwell would be. His office. They reached the grand staircase, marble floors, gold-lined railings, a place built on dirty money. Ellis whispered, "This feels too easy." As if on cue, a red laser dot appeared on his chest. Aisha yanked him down. A gunshot cracked through the silence, missing by inches. They had walked into a trap. Move, Aisha hissed, dragging Ellis behind a pillar. Bullets rained down, guards emerging from the shadows. Danielle screamed, ducking behind a statue. What do we do? Aisha's mind raced. They were pinned, outnumbered. Then, a voice echoed from the top of the staircase. Calm, powerful. You should have left this alone. Aisha looked up. There, standing above them, dressed in an expensive suit, Senator William Rothwell. And he was smiling. Aisha's grip on her gun tightened. You killed those reporters. Rothwell didn't blink. Collateral damage. Ellis seethed. You're a monster. Rothwell sighed. Spare me the morality speech, detective. The world runs on power, not justice. You of all people should know that. Aisha stepped forward. That's why we're here, to end this. Rothwell smirked. End what? You think killing me will change anything? He gestured to the guards around them. The Brotherhood isn't a person. It's an idea. And you can't kill an idea. Aisha's jaw clenched. Watch me. She fired. Rothwell dove behind the railing as bullets erupted around them. The guards opened fire. Chaos exploded. Ellis tackled a guard, wrestling for control of his weapon. Danielle ducked, grabbing a fallen pistol. Aisha moved fast, dodging bullets, fighting her way up the stairs. She needed to get to Rothwell. He was running. Aisha chased. Up the stairs, down a long hallway. She caught him just as he reached a hidden exit. He turned, raising a pistol. Aisha was faster. Bang. The bullet tore through his leg. Rothwell collapsed, screaming. His gun clattered to the floor. Aisha towered over him. You don't run from this. He panted, blood soaking his expensive suit. You think you've won. Aisha pressed her gun to his temple. No, but I think I just made the Brotherhood bleed. Rothwell laughed. A slow, chilling laugh. Aisha's finger twitched on the trigger. Then, bang, a single gunshot. Not from her. From behind. Aisha's eyes widened as Ellis fell to the floor. A bullet through his chest. Danielle screamed. Aisha's world stopped. Behind her, another figure stepped out of the shadows. A familiar face. Judge Raymond Henshaw. Alive. Smirking. Did you really think I'd stay in a cell? He sneered. Aisha's hands trembled. Ellis lay motionless. Blood pooling. Rothwell grinned. You were never going to win. Aisha's heart raged. She looked at Henshaw, at Rothwell, at Ellis, and she made her choice. She pulled the trigger. Bang. Aisha Carter had never hesitated before. never second-guessed, never felt the weight of a trigger as much as she did now. Her bullet hit Judge Raymond Henshaw square in the chest. His smirk vanished, replaced with shock. He staggered backward, gasping, his hands flying to the wound, dark red blooming across his pristine white shirt. He let out a choked laugh. You think this changes anything?" Then he collapsed. Dead. But Aisha didn't care. Because Ellis was dying. She dropped her gun and rushed to his side. Blood soaked his shirt, his breath ragged. "Ellis, stay with me," she pleaded, pressing her hands against the wound. He coughed, his face twisted in pain. "Damn it, Aisha, you always drag me into the worst situations." A weak smile. Tears blurred her vision. "You're gonna be okay." Ellis wheezed. "Liar." Danielle was kneeling beside them, shaking. "We need to get him out of here." A movement caught Aisha's eye. Rothwell, still alive, still watching. His leg wound slowed him, but his smirk was back. "You think this is over?" he rasped. "Kill me, and another takes my place." Aisha grabbed her gun and pointed it at him. His eyes gleamed. "Go ahead," he taunted. "Pull the trigger. Prove to the world that you're no different from me." Aisha's hands shook. She wanted to. She wanted to end him right here. But then she looked at Ellis, at Danielle, and she knew. Killing Rothwell wouldn't stop the Brotherhood. Exposing him would. She took a slow breath. Then she lowered her gun. "No," she said. "You're going to prison." Rothwell's smirk faltered. "What?" Aisha pulled out her phone, turning the screen toward him. The red LIV button blinked. The entire world had just heard everything. Rothwell's confession. His crimes. The Brotherhood's truth. Danielle had streamed the whole thing. From the moment they entered the mansion to this exact second. Millions of viewers. The world was watching. Rothwell's face drained of color. "You." Bang. A gunshot rang out. Not from Aisha. Not from Danielle. From one of Rothwell's own guards. The bullet tore into his back. A kill shot. Rothwell gasped, his eyes wide with betrayal. Then he crumpled. Dead. Aisha's heart pounded. Danielle's breath hitched. Why? Why would they? Ellis groaned. The Brotherhood doesn't leave loose ends. Aisha clenched her jaw. The moment Rothwell was exposed, he became expendable. The Brotherhood had silenced him. And now, they would come for her. For all of them. She heard footsteps, more guards, more assassins. They had seconds to escape. Aisha grabbed Ellis under his arm, lifting him. He gritted his teeth in pain, but he didn't fight her. Danielle pulled open a side door. Come on. They ran. Through the corridors, down the back halls, out into the night. Aisha's car was still there. She shoved Ellis inside, climbed in the driver's seat, and floored it. Tires screeched. Gunfire chased them down the road. Then, they were gone, escaping into the darkness. 1 week later, unknown location. Ellis woke up to the sound of waves. He groaned, shifting in the hospital bed. His chest ached, but he was alive. About time you woke up, Aisha's voice said. He turned his head. She was sitting beside him, arms crossed, eyes tired but alert. He let out a weak chuckle. You didn't leave, huh? Aisha smirked, not for a second. Danielle stood by the window, arms wrapped around herself. The whole world knows about the Brotherhood now. Aisha nodded. The FBI is unraveling everything. Arrests are being made. But, Ellis sighed, but they're still out there. Aisha's face darkened. Yeah, the Brotherhood wasn't dead. Wounded, yes. Exposed. Damaged. But not gone. Danielle swallowed. What do we do now? Aisha took a slow breath. We don't stop. Ellis smirked weakly. I was afraid you'd say that. Haisha looked at the horizon. The fight wasn't over. But now, the world was watching. And for the first time, the Brotherhood was afraid. The end.